Good morning.
Good morning.
There we go. Okay. That's good to be here. This last year, we've worked a little bit on two different documents to try to explain to ourselves and other people who we are as a church. And the first one was this little card we made, and a very big card outside by my office there that just talks about the kind of church we are. So if you haven't seen one of those, they're out there. If you want to give one to friends, they're out there. Just a nice little thing to say, oh yeah, here's who we are. The bigger thing we worked on was our covenant statement, which you have a copy of in your bulletin. And let's be honest, this covenant actually came, we borrowed it basically directly from Austin Mennonite Church, so it's not like we spent a lot of time writing this. But we did spend some time studying it, and then we had a ceremony where we took that big one on the back wall there, and some of us, at least most of us, signed it. We said, yes, that's who we are, that's who we want to be. Now, before I get any further into this, it's really important to remember that these various pieces of paper are not really the identity of this church. The identity of this church is what we all do during the week. That's the true identity of this church. I was standing on my porch a few weeks ago, and somebody walked by. And my very evangelistic dog went out to say hi. And so, well, I should probably say something too. So I talked to the person. There was somebody who was new to the neighborhood and was possibly going to be moving here permanently, wasn't sure yet. Said you liked the neighborhood so far. And so I mentioned that I was pastor of this church. And she said, oh yeah, I've heard about your church. It has a really good reputation. So-and-so told me about your church. And the so-and-so who told her wasn't even somebody I knew. So some stranger recommended to some other stranger that this was a good church. And that's because of what you do during the week. That's the true foundation of this church. This is not the church with the awesome worship band up here, or we have the best program every Sunday morning, or the mostest programs every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday, or all this sort of stuff. It's you guys. Right? So Paul talks about this in 2 Corinthians, the little passage that was read. He talks to the Corinthian church, and he says, you guys are my recommendation to God. Right? Which, in the case of the Corinthian church, was really bad news for Paul. Right? But I sort of feel that as a pastor. Right? That someday I'm going to stand before God, and I'm going to go, I don't know, I tried. Right? Or am I going to go, yeah, them. Right? They were this way when I got here, so I can't take a lot of credit, but I'll take some of it. I don't mind. Right? So you guys are the reputation of this church, and that's a good thing. But in any case, we signed this covenant, and one of the reasons for it, if you'll remember, is because this whole membership thing has become less important as the generation has turned here. It used to be really important where you were a member of the church and who kept the membership rolls, and then at some point you had to go from active to inactive members if people were away, and who had to decide that, and when did you boot people off, and all of this sort of stuff. And now this is all much less important in most churches. And some people are going, oh, it's just not the way it used to be. And then some of us point out that there's nothing in the New Testament about church membership. There's not a word there. I think 2 Timothy, could be 1 Timothy, has a little thing in there about people on the list, but it's a widow's list. Otherwise there's nothing about keeping membership lists. But on the other hand, if you do a search in the Bible for the word covenant, you come up with verse after verse after verse after verse after verse of covenant. So covenant, at least, is a solidly biblical thing. And so we decided to do a covenant for 1 year because we're a transitory group. And sometimes it's hard to think down the road too far. Am I willing to commit myself to this body of believers for the rest of my life? Wow, seriously? Right? But like this year I can commit myself to this group. our covenant that we made is more of a New Testament covenant than an Old Testament covenant. Right? So we read this passage from Deuteronomy, and that covenant was like rules, 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 do it or else. Right? And there's no rules on our covenant, and there's no or else. Right? There's really neither carrots nor sticks in our covenant. There's just, here's what we're going to keep trying to be, and if we fail, well, we're just going to try again. Which is, right? So that's what Paul talks about too, right? In the end of this 2 Corinthians passage, he says that the law kills, right? But the Spirit gives life. So hopefully we have that. So we wrote this. And most of the reason that we're doing this morning is just so you have a chance to, again, yourself, look at this and ask yourself, how are you doing? Right? And again, not at all in any way a guilt-inducing sort of exercise. That wasn't the intention at all. Because mostly, I think, you're doing well. Right? And let's face it, there aren't a lot of rules to follow anyway, so you can't be breaking the rules. Right? But this is what we committed ourselves to, and here we still are, most of us. So a couple of things I wanted to highlight. Right? Under who we are, the first sentence is, we are formed by and identified with the Anabaptist traditions of the Christian faith. I like the plural in there, Anabaptist traditions, because being an Anabaptist, being part of that group of churches, can mean so many different things. To the point where it's almost a meaningless statement, because it can mean so many different things.
I don't know what Anabaptist means.
Exactly. Right? So what we tried to do is define what that means in the next sentence. So the next sentence, these traditions emphasize living in a community of peace, justice, service, and simple living, the study of Scripture, the priesthood of all believers, and believers' baptism. Right? So, I mean, this is a long thing to unpack, right? And there's little booklets here on Church of the Brethren. There's little booklets here on Mennonites. But let's face it, you know, most of you, if you have questions, you're going to Google it anyway. Right? Booklets aren't as useful as they used to be. My recommendation is always something called Third Way Cafe. Right? So Third Way Cafe is a great little website on what it means to be part of the Anabaptist movement and sort of a who are the Mennonites kind of question and answer, and you can ask questions. Right? So all of these are part of who we are. But who we are isn't, right, doesn't get us there, because we want to be more. Right? There should be some ambition in the Christian faith. All right? So under the first sentence there, we are fellow sojourners and followers of Christ. We are a very Jesus-y church. Or at least I am a very Jesus-y pastor. And so, right, so if you're hoping to hear about something other than Jesus, well, you're gonna have to be patient, because I mostly preach Jesus up here, which is fine. But the most important phrase in this section for me is the third one, where it says that we are both inwardly supportive and outwardly oriented. So this is who we are. Or at least this is who I want us to be. Right? So we support one another. Right? I suspect at some point in the history of this church, people came 15 minutes early and stood around and talked. Maybe even like half an hour early and stood around and talked. That's becoming less common. Right? But, right, passing the peace in many churches is a 30-second thing. You stand right where you are, peace be with you, peace be with you, peace be with you, and you sit down. Right? And here, well, it's a little bit of a longer process. Right? And afterwards, we occasionally have people who try to, like, zoom out the door as soon as the service is over, and that's hard to do here. Because people want to talk, right? Because you can't be inwardly supportive unless you actually get to know one another. Right? And actually, right? It also means that when you arrive here Sunday morning, you don't have to pretend to be something that you're not. Right? So if you're really not doing well, don't smile and say, yes, everything's fine. Because we can't support you if you're not going to tell us how things really are. And so some of you arrived this morning not fine. Right? Blair's not laughing at all. right? Because she's got a 3-year-old, right? You can't always be fine when you have a 3-year-old, an almost 3-year-old. An actual 3-year-old. Oh, yeah, exactly. How many of you have forgotten those days by now of having a 3-year-old? Yeah, it doesn't forget very easy, does it? We're always here. Right? Some of us might be looking forward to that. Don't. Anyway, right? Inwardly supportive, right? But outwardly oriented. Right? Because like I said at the beginning, that's where this church happens. That the stuff you do in your work, in your life, in your other involvements, and again, I can't spend any time this morning sort of enumerating all of the things that we do, because we'd be here all morning and I'd still forget stuff. Right? And that's a great position to be in. Right? So keep it up. Right? And if you lack for something to do, turn to your neighbor and ask, and they'll find you something, trust me. This is who we are. And so we have this other section called What We Are Called to Do, because, right? But again, it's not one of these, right? Here are the rules you have to follow. And it's not, here's a bunch of things you have to do on top of the 10 million things you're already doing. It's things you can do as you're already doing the things you're already doing. Because, again, I'm guessing most of you don't really need more things to do. So we try to live our lives in a certain way. We try to be the body of Christ in the world. And that's our task. Finally, it's really important to understand, right, and keep in mind our vision of leadership. Right? The leadership of this church is you. This is your church. This is not my church. Like I tell people all the time, I just work here. This is your church. You lead it. You fix it up. You do the singing here, because it's not the band that's going to do the singing for you. You are the work of the church in the world. This allows me as the pastor to preach boldly. I say what I really think up here, recognizing that many of you are going to disagree with me. And that allows me to say, right, I don't have to worry about whether you agree. Because there's probably going to be somebody who disagrees with most everything I say somewhere in this congregation. And that's good. Please do that. Keep disagreeing with me, and I'm going to keep preaching boldly. We'll figure this out together. So here we are as a church. Sometimes I think about this as the This Little Piggy church. Did you guys do This Little Piggy with your kids?
Yes.
This little piggy went to market, and this little piggy stayed home because some of us are shy. Right? And this little piggy had roast beef, and this little piggy had none because some of us are vegetarians. And this little piggy cried, wee, wee, wee. We are the church. We do the work here. We worship, we sing, we rejoice, we support one another. Amen.